There's a fear or concern that arises when we first get into the direct path, which cuts through all of the mind's layers to sustain the ego. And of course, it has to do with the ego. This concern usually comes up as different versions of the same question, which is if I really need my ego to live. That's one of the main questions that comes up with this concern. And this is because when we cut through all the layers of the mind and we stay directly with our being, there is a sense of losing something. And so people are usually concerned about this, and I want to address this in this video. Now, people would say, I am afraid that I'm going to lose my personality, or they're concerned about their personality, about their gifts or what they love doing, or maybe their desires of something that they want to do. So there's a bit of a rebellion on that side, and there's a half-truth to this rebellion, because there are parts of ourselves that obviously is what we want to nourish. But you see, the problem here is that there is the ego, and I'm going to call it the self, the true self, that they're both mixed up. They're both being the same thing. And so that's why we have cognitive dissonance or inner conflict, because the two are wanting to do something and they're different, they're opposed. So you see, that's why there is so much problems, because without that, we just are what we are. The ego is not what we are. So another thing that I see a lot, especially in comments and messages and people who voice their opinion on this, is that the ego is necessary. I want to make this discernment right now so we don't get confused. The ego is a non-existent entity that lives as an imagination in our minds. So it's not necessary. What people refer to as the ego necessary in our lives, they're referring to the sense of individuality. That has nothing to do with the ego, because the ego is a contrived, it's a memory, it's a contraction of who we are. It's a misalignment of who we are. So this causes a huge disservice in our own expression, because two things are going to happen. We're going to justify unkind behaviors on behalf of the ego, because guess what? The ego is necessary to live. And also, we're going to label things that we love doing as egoic. And I see this all the time in people saying, I don't know if I want to do this because that's probably my ego wanting to do it. And guess what? That is the ego saying that because it keeps them safe from trying to do something that causes a lot of resistance, because the things that we love doing are usually something that we resist doing. Otherwise, we would be doing it and we wouldn't even concern ourselves with the question. So you see, this causes a huge disservice. So that's why in my vocabulary, in my book, I don't use the ego as something that represents our individuality. We have to make this discernment. If we don't, then we're still mixed up with the ego and the self, and we're back to the same problem, you see? So what do we do in the direct path? We cut through all the layers of the mind, even those who are saying, I'm losing my personality. Don't worry, you're not going to lose it. I'm going to weaken my gifts because I'm not paying attention to it. This is the ego who has appropriated your gifts, or actually the spontaneous natural gifts that you have. You see? So when we cut through all the layers of the mind and we stay with simply being, with our true self, then we are remaining in the space in which there is no oxygen for the ego. Now, here's the thing. All the traditions in the past, all the great spiritual traditions have always emphasized this as a direct way to our true being. And this is how we go into the inward path, the one that brings us to our true being, and stay there. You see, you will see that there is a lot of things that are suggested in this inward path. One of them is to surrender and let go of all outward desires. This gets confused with the idea that I must get rid of everything, my job, my family, my community. And if that's what people want to do, then that's great. But that's not what this is meaning. The meaning of this is to let go in the moment of everything so you can be naked in yourself. You can be without any layers, any clothing. We're cutting through all the layers of the mind to remain in silence, in stillness. This is not because we're going to achieve something there, because that's the ego again that wants to achieve something, that wants to take out something from silence. It wants to dig into silence to get something. But because by being there, we are depriving the ego from oxygen. And so as we do this, everything else will happen naturally. We do have some concessions when we speak about the outward path, saying, don't worry, all your gifts, your personality are going to be there because you are not doing it. That's naturally who you are. So you see how when you remain in yourself as you are in this stillness, then this will simply shine as it has been. The only difference is that there won't be an ego, or at least so much of a contraction, a resistance to this, and a substitution of some of these behaviors by the ones that you don't want. There's going to be less of that. And that's what we call, from the progressive paths, we call it healing. We call it alignment. We call it becoming more who you are. Actually, is becoming less what you're not. And this is the outward path that is necessary. You see, but there are many things that come up as questions. And am I doing it right? Is this coming up because I still have problems with the ego and so on? This is all talk from the same old ego, you see? So the outward path is a necessary one that obviously needs to be there. It's not like we take this direct path into nothingness. This is just halfway the path. It's only one step that we take to realize who we are, because only through this full knowledge of who we are is that we can begin to see the non-existence of the ego, that is just some image in our minds that keep repeating through memory what we should be doing. And so what do? By cutting through all the layers of the mind, that's how I like to describe it, and stay with that which is prior to the mind, always present, even in the presence of thought and mental activity. Stay with that. That'll naturally, as I have been saying, deprive the ego from oxygen, from what it needs. What does it need? What is this oxygen? Thoughts, constant thoughts, a narrative. And so we weaken that part. So more of that which is already emanating from you can manifest, can be created. That's why we call ourselves creators, because naturally what this being wants to do is to express itself, and expression is creation. So creation is not about doing a particular service or of being an artist or a musician or anything of that kind. It's just an expression of who you are. And you can just be simply what you are. There are many, many people who have no particular direction, and they're just simply who they are. And by that expression, people admire them. They're fascinated by how spontaneous they can be, and they don't care about what people say and anything else, because they're just being who they are. So when we're talking about being who we are, it's not about becoming something special in the world, becoming famous or popular. It's about being what comes through. Just allowing this which is flowing naturally to be without so much resistance. So this is not a complicated thing. This is something that I feel, especially in our age, has been blown out of proportions in terms of spirituality and manifestation and so many things. This is about the ordinary, natural, beautiful being that we all are, without the resistances, without the insecurities, without the fears. There are so many ways we can talk about this, but I find it that the most beautiful way is the simple expression of what we are. And what we are is not something that we have to train or we have to get advanced at, or meditation is going to make us better. No, meditation is just a way to remember who we are at any moment so we don't forget through the mental activity, the conditioning of the mind. And that's how you shine as what you are without so much effort.